So you want to fly beyond visual line of sight, huh? Well, good timing. The FAA proposed new rules early August, and then now they're asking for comments. And yes, the proposal is, well, 650 pages long, and it's definitely complicated. That's actually why we made this 35-minute video that's going to summarize all of it. Now, make sure you go watch it before you move on and come back when you're done. But if you're a drone operator, whether you're commercial, recreational, in agriculture, cinematography, FPV, or even you're flying for a small business or even a large business, well, this video is for you, because the current proposal leaves out the very people who have been flying BVLOS safely for years, operators like you and me. That's why a coalition of industry groups, namely Pilot Institute, Influential Drones, Drone Service Provider Alliance, the Drone Advisory Council, the FPV Freedom Coalition, and Flight Test, have come together to submit a counter-proposal. And this one is going to include you. And in this video, I'm going to be walking you through exactly what we're proposing, why it matters to you, and how you can make your voice heard and amplify the message before the common deadline of October 6th. Let's get to it. Now you might be wondering, why do we need a whole new proposal, Greg? Well, as currently proposed, the FAA's Part 108 focuses heavily on automation and airworthiness approval. And as a matter of fact, it focuses only on fully autonomous BVLOS flights. And that's important for the future, no doubt. But it ignores a huge group of pilots who are already operating safely with BVLOS waivers under Part 107. By the way, let's be clear here, NPRM, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight. That's for the rest of the video. So our proposal adds a pathway for low-risk, non-autonomous BVLOS operations. The key part that's completely missing right now. I like to think of it this way. The FAA has done it before. Flying at night, flying over people, started with waivers under Part 107. Once the safety was proven, then they were codified into regulation. And we wanted to follow that same exact proven model for BVLOS. And the best part, this option is actually ready to go almost immediately after rulemaking, whenever that's going to be 6, 8, 12 months in the future, because all the building blocks already exist under Part 107. We're actually proposing that this either can be added to Part 107 as a new subpart, but this could also live in Part 108 as a new subpart. This could even be its own part, like Part 109. But let's get to it. The FAA is going to figure this out. We don't have to really worry about this. Now, to be clear here, we're not proposing to remove the current Part 108 proposal. That we want to keep pretty much as it is, with a few modifications that I'm going to be talking at the end of the video. So what does this look like? Pretty straightforward. The first key concept here is, unlike the current proposal, our operations use the concept of human in the loop. You may not have heard this term before, but this is where a certificated pilot, in this case a certificated remote pilot in command, an RPIC, is going to be responsible for the flight. Second key concept, low-risk, non-autonomous flights. Now, this means flights that are either done manually controlled with a controller, like most of the flights you do, or using a very simple pre-programmed route, like an autopilot in manned aviation. Now, you've probably done some of these already with like mapping missions. Also, we don't want to see simplified user interface, SUI for short, as it is proposed right now. No full autonomy here without a pilot, always a pilot in the loop. And we've identified 3 distinct categories of low-risk operation, each of which are going to have slightly different operational requirements. And the first one is extended visual line of sight, or EVLOS for short. Also, we're going to have agricultural operation. And then the last one is shielded operations. More on that in a few minutes. Because of this framework with the human in the loop option here, there actually is no need for airworthiness acceptance, like the FAA is proposing for fully autonomous missions. With our proposal, you can actually use your current drone to do this, which is beautiful. Unlike the current proposal, which does not include FAA certification, we are actually proposing to create a new BVLOS non-autonomous rating. Now, this is an add-on to your Part 107 certificate. Why, you may ask? Well, because believe it or not, the current structure of Part 107 is pretty much already set up for this type of low-risk operations. I mean, that's exactly why we've been flying under all these waivers under Part 107 all this time. The idea here is that there's no new operator certificate. Instead, we're going to be using a rating, which is just additional training and testing. Topics are pretty straightforward with things like regulation, shielded operation, safe distance criteria, and training specific to the aircraft to be flown. The FAA actually already has a full list of these topics that should be covered, so let's just go ahead and use that. Now, the knowledge test would be 40 to 60 questions at a PSI testing center, pretty much like you've done with your Part 107 initial exam. And to keep things simple, when it comes to currency, as long as you keep your Part 107 up to date and that you renew your BVLOS rating every 24 calendar months, then you're good to go. The currency training would be free using the FAA safety website that would be modeled after the current method. Industry could also be contributing courses for approval, keeping things modern and also flexible. Now, one of the big pluses of the current proposal was the ability to fly drones that are larger than 55 pounds, which is a current limitation under Part 107. So what do we do with that? Well, guess what? The FAA has learned a whole lot of lessons over the last few years with that too, with 49 USC 44807 exemptions. So we are proposing a large UAS rating. Now, this probably needs to be added to Part 107, but we're going to let the FAA decide on that. The one thing that we know is that operators have safely flown drones that are well over 55 pounds under the exemption. This large UAS rating would codify the proven pathway without forcing operators into the full complexity of the fully autonomous Part 108 as it is proposed right now. Now remember, this whole proposal right here is about manually flying the drone. So let's say you want to fly an ag drone, BVLOS, manually. Sure thing. Get a 107, add a large UAS rating, add a BVLOS rating, you're good to go. And by the way, this is the very same thing that we are doing right now in the manned aircraft world. If you want to fly a multi-engine aircraft or if you want to fly a private jet today, get a commercial pilot license, get an instrument rating, and then you get an additional type rating because the aircraft is pretty large, for example. And this worked for the last 100 years. Let's use it again. Next topic, in this current proposal, the FAA wants to make sure that the flight coordinator gets at least 5 hours of flight time on the platform that they're going to supervise. We actually would like to increase that for someone who's going to be flying manually beyond visual line of sight. So we're proposing a requirement of 10 hours of operating experience on each platform that you're going to fly BVLOS. This doesn't really have to be BVLOS hours for all of them. And quite frankly, it shouldn't start by doing BVLOS. You should get experience with the platform first within visual line of sight for 10 hours before you fly beyond it. We recommend that the training actually includes both ground and flight training, covering normal, abnormal, and emergency procedures, and of course, BVLOS procedures as well. And speaking of training, and since we're going to be including the possibility of using visual observers in this proposal, we think that they should also be trained in airspace awareness, communication, and detect and avoid responsibilities. The remote pilot in command could provide that training directly, or they could use a third-party training. And since we're talking about personnel, here's something important. Unlike the FAA's current proposal, our proposal keeps things, well, simple. And this is because our operation we want to complete are simple, low risk. So no need for operation supervisor, no flight coordinator. The only required role here is the remote pilot in command, just like under Part 107. Now, visual observers are optional, added when the mission calls for it, and this would avoid unnecessary bureaucracy while keeping accountability very clear. And you might be asking, what about the aircraft itself? Well, since they are low-risk, human-controlled operation, aircraft would not need to have the new Part 108 airworthiness acceptance or any kind of noise certification. Remember, these are the same aircraft that we are currently using under Part 107 right now. Keep it simple. And yes, for most operation, the familiar Part 107 weight limit of 55 pounds would still apply unless, of course, you hold that large UAS rating that we just discussed. So now to the interesting part. How do you actually operate? Well, the beauty of all of this is that most of the operation rules stay exactly the same as Part 107. Anti-collision lighting for twilight and night operation. No careless and reckless operation. This seems like a pretty obvious thing. Right-of-way rules always yield to man aircraft. No ADS-B out or no transponder in the transmit mode to avoid low altitude channel saturation. Same as we see in Part 107. Weather minimums, 3-mile visibility. That should be measured from the remote pilot in command, and if you're using a visual observer, from the visual observer as well. And then the last thing is 1 pilot per aircraft unless you have a waiver for that. This is all about continuity, carrying forward what already works. We're requesting an additional feature though. ADS-B-in technology should be required for situational awareness. This doesn't have to be in the drone necessarily, although a lot of drones have it these days. A ground-based solution would work, or even an app on your phone. Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned 3 types of operations. Now that you know the general rules that we're proposing, let's take a look at the details of each. EVLOS, extended visual line of sight, agricultural, and shielded operation, starting with EVLOS. So what does that even mean? I like to think of EVLOS as a stepping stone between VLOS, visual line of sight, and fully autonomous beyond visual line of sight. And by the way, this is not novel. We did not invent anything here. Canada, for example, is already doing something very much like this. And here's how it works under our proposal. Up to 0.5 mile, half a mile from the pilot, no VO, no DAA required. You do need to have command of the airspace though. So half a mile could be slightly beyond visual line of sight. From half a mile to 2 miles, you need to use either a visual observer or have ground-based detect and avoid system. And yes, you should be able to do daisy chaining of visual observers under this. And beyond 2 miles is a possibility if you are using a ground-based detect and avoid system that is within the manufacturer's validated range. And that's really it. 2 miles is plenty of distance for most people. This has been done with waivers all over the country safely. Let's make sure we can democratize this approach right here. This balances safety with flexibility, letting the technology or the VOs extend the reach and operate safely. Next one is agricultural operation. Now, ag flights are some of the lowest risk operation in aviation. Now you might be thinking, really? Yes, why? They happen at very low altitude, typically under 50 feet. They're in rural, sparsely populated areas in most cases. And there's almost no chance of conflict with manned crop dusters. And here's why. Farmers are not going to hire a drone and an airplane over the same field at the same time to do the same job. And if they do, they know that they have to coordinate. Now, because of this, requiring the expensive detect and avoid system doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Safety is achieved through simple limit on altitude and then also with the command and control range. So 50 feet max, unless you have that wave for your operation. A maximum distance, well, that's whatever the control and command manufacturer sets as the limit. But chances are the aircraft is going to either run out of battery before they run out of range, or they're going to reach the boundaries of the field before, well, they get out of range again. Again, this is all low risk. And the last type of special operations is shielded operations. That's what everyone was really hoping would be in the proposal. And yes, there's a mention of it, but I personally think that it was a little bit weak. So we redefined it, at least for our low-risk, non-autonomous missions. So what shielded operations, you ask? Well, it means flying within 200 feet of a structure, of a tree, of the terrain, whatever it is where manned aircraft don't normally go. And yes, I know that some manned aircraft are going to be in there, but that's why we require ADS-B-in. One key component here that I really need to emphasize. The FAA needs to prioritize approving portable conspicuity devices. What is that? It's a device that essentially broadcasts the aircraft position, sending the very same signal that ADS-B does, but without being called ADS-B. And these are called electronic conspicuity devices in the NPRM. That's EC for short. There are companies out there like Avionics that have a solution available. It's actually been tested successfully in the UK, not the United States, in the UK for a while. So why do we even care about this? Well, because the more airspace users are visible to each other, the better we can avoid them. Now, this means that balloon operators, gliders, skydivers, paramotors, and any manned aircraft that don't have an electrical system can now be visible to other people. Remember, a balloon does not have the ability to navigate away from a delivery drone that is coming at 100 miles an hour. That is not something that we should be requesting of them. Now, I'll go one step further. If this is something that the FAA really wants to do, then they should subsidize those devices to keep the users of the airspace safe, just like we asked for them to subsidize remote ID modules, which sadly never happened. And by the way, shielded operation is not a new concept. This is already recognized internationally, including in New Zealand and in some ICAO discussions. Now, New Zealand, for example, goes up to 100 meters, which is 328 feet. Also, the BVLOS ARC, the Aviation Ruling Committee, proposed 100 feet. Now, I know we're proposing 200 feet. I think that we would also be happy with 100, but there's got to be something available in there. We also propose keeping the flexibility operators currently have with existing waivers, which means what? Which means that altitude should be waivable if justified. We also ask for a NOTAM that would be required if you're going beyond 1 mile from the takeoff point. This would help the main aircraft community as well know exactly where there might be a drone. And then the maximum distance would be limited by the manufacturer's validated C2 range. Again, the same thing that we did earlier for agricultural operation. And we believe that this approach provides a natural safety separation without having all the unnecessary cost that we're seeing in the proposed regulation right now. Next, I want to talk about strategic deconfliction. I mean, I really don't, but we probably should. The FAA's draft Part 108 requires UTM, unmanned traffic management, and deconfliction services, which makes sense for fully autonomous drones. But for those low-risk, non-autonomous flights, that's a bit overkill. Our proposal? The remote pilot in command remains responsible. No extra services are needed. Conformance monitoring? Done by the remote pilot in command. Check. Strategic deconfliction? Done by the remote pilot in command, or the visual observer, or the ground-based DAA system, or even using ADS-B in. This is how it's done today. Let's continue doing that safely. For this type of operation, there's no need at the moment for UTM. Now, I'm not saying that we should not develop UTM over time, but this gives actually the industry time to build UTM so that everyone eventually can use it, or that the folks that really need it can eventually use it. And this would be done without delaying existing low-risk operation. Always love a good win-win situation. All right, next, let's go ahead and talk about required documentations. Operators should have an operations manual with BVLOS procedures, and that's the bare minimum. But requiring a full airline-style safety management system, we think that this is disproportionate. Instead, we suggest that the FAA works on creating a UAS-tailored SMS safety management system in the future. But for now, operations manual should fit the bill. And for cybersecurity, if you're using cloud services or if you're using a network system, then you should follow risk scale policies. Keep it proportional. Next topic is the TSA and some data reporting. And there were some pretty heavy-handed requirements in the NPRM, some of which make sense, some of them don't. But since these low-risk, non-autonomous operations mirror the Part 107 stuff, well, there's no TSA threat assessment that should apply. And there's no additional data reporting either, because, well, we're not doing this at the moment. The FAA's proposed 10840 and 10845 are really designed for large-scale, fully autonomous operation. For us, they're duplicative and they're really burdensome. And just like in the current NPRM, we think that there should be some very simple, common sense duty and rest requirements. 10 hours of maximum duty day, 8 hours of maximum flight time per day, 50 hours of maximum duty per week, 10 hours minimum rest before duty, and then 1 full rest day per week. Now, this should ensure safety without overcomplicating things. And there you have it, at least for this portion. This is our counter-proposal to create a safe, scalable, immediately usable path for BVLOS operation that keeps the human in the loop for low-risk operations. What else do you need? It builds directly on the proven 107 framework. It protects current operators from disruption. It avoids unnecessary costs that are tied to airworthiness approval and to heavy automation. And this is really about making sure that you, the community of real-world operators, are not left out of the future of BVLOS. Now, before we wrap this, I want to quickly cover our stance on fully autonomous BVLOS operations because, well, that's the part of the rule that doesn't involve a human flying. Different risk profile, different tools. And here's what we support, and here's where we think that the FAA should, well, maybe adjust the course a little bit. And first is a clear win. The FAA's proposal to prohibit assault, threat, intimidation, or interference with UAS crews is amazing, okay? That protection already exists for crewed aviation, and it's long overdue for drone folks as well. Now, this gives law enforcement a clear federal basis for action, We support it. We encourage a strong public outreach so that everyone understands that these protections apply anywhere UAS operations are going to happen. Next, we oppose giving the TSA a blank check to impose security requirements outside of normal rulemaking, and this should be kind of standard already. Now, that bypasses the transparency and the stakeholder input that are currently required. Now, security rules should be risk-based, proportionate, and it should be publicly vetted. If urgent threat arises, then the TSA already has an emergency tool that they can use, and then it can coordinate with the FAA. A standing unilateral authority is not really appropriate in this case. Next up, reporting requirements. Now, we agree that fully autonomous operations merit having more oversight, but the proposal always on high volume reporting goes a little bit too far. It scales cost based on flight count, not really on risk, which is the way that it should be. And what it does is it buries both the operator and the FAA in low value data. Our recommendation instead is to have operators report incidents, anomalies, and safety relevant performance only. Now, keep the routine operation data with the operator unless it is requested. Now, use the Canadian approach, actually, of the manufacturer-centric model. This means that the operator reports the incidents to the manufacturer, and then the manufacturer is going to submit a single annual safety report to the FAA. This means actionable trends, minimal duplication of effort. Now, we should also leverage the high-value NASA ASRS report as a voluntary, confidential channel that will help surface all of the safety insights without any punishment. This focuses everyone on meaningful safety signals, not just a dashboard that's full of noise and things that nobody's ever going to look at. Next topic is registration. Seems like a harmless one, but let's think about this for a second. They're trying to require autonomous UAS to register under Part 47, which is really like the place where manned aircraft are going to register at the moment. And this adds a lot of paperwork, and that does not scale very well. Ask me how I know, and we only have one aircraft. This could also exhaust the N number supply, because you would be getting an N number for your aircraft. And the worst part that I haven't heard anybody talk about is that it would trigger state-level fees that are tied to N numbers, creating an unintended cost with no safety payoff at all. For example, Arizona has an additional registration required for aircraft. This would apply as well. Unmanned aircraft under Part 107 and under Part 108, I think, should remain under Part 48 for registration. This next one had me scratching my head a little bit. The FAA is proposing that for Category 2 population densities, which means that not a whole lot of people, you need to have a command and control link that uses a new spectrum that is not 2.4 to 5.8 gigahertz spectrum that we've seen to date. Now, this spectrum, 2.4, 5.8 gigahertz, has proven reliable under Part 107, including for BVLOS operations. And if interference happens, RTH or failsafe is going to bring the aircraft home safely, and it's not just going to drop out of the sky. We actually recommend saving the licensed aviation grade spectrum for higher risk operation, like Category 4 and Category 5, for example, and only after there's been an operator assessment. That aligns with a risk-based approach again. Speaking of a head scratcher, here's another one. FAA, please preserve lands for efficient access near airports. Also, please continue to allow prior ATC coordination in order to fly above grid altitudes when this can safely be done. These tools enable legitimate missions without bogging the operator down with unlimited paperwork, okay? And you might be wondering, why am I saying all of this? Well, the current proposal that's trying to rewrite 107.41 makes it look like LANS is going to change drastically. It's very unclear, it's very not straightforward, but we don't really like the sound of it. So please keep LANS as it is, untouched. This is an amazing program. You might be wondering, what about the recreational crowd? We haven't really talked too much about that so far. And there's actually a reason for it. As it is written right now, the recreational BVLOS section adds equipment standards, category limits, and a lot of reporting. So a lot of heavy stuff that almost no one is going to be using it. And that, of course, is if you want to fly a drone recreationally beyond visual line of sight, fully autonomously. What's really the fun in that? So of course, that's a problem. Recreational pilots, 1.5 million of them, are the pipeline for tomorrow's pilots. AMPs, engineers, programmers, a lot of people get into this field in order to, well, move on into aviation eventually. So I think the FAA needs to figure out a way to include non-autonomous, low-risk BVLOS flights for recreational pilots. There are different ways of doing this, I think. This could be an exemption to recreational BVLOS for simplified user interface, for example. Remove that, aka allow full manual control. Remove heavy reporting, strategic deconfliction, conformance monitoring, and airworthiness acceptance. Then the FAA could also require reasonable training, testing on the airspace, and then on some equipment. Now, this is the role where the CBOs actually, I think, could lead the way. They could be hosting recreational BVLOS flights inside of a FRIA, for example, or they could allow recreational pilots into the EVLOS that we talked about, or into shielded operation, like we mentioned earlier, with a couple tweaks. Now, this would need to make changes to 49 USC 44809. Please, let's get this done. For the next topic, we believe that requiring FAA review for every area turns this into, well, pretty much a waiver again. Instead, we recommend that the FAA publishes objective criteria so that operators can self-assess and comply without individualized approval. The FAA has years of BVLOS waiver data. Codified what you have into proven mitigation, like what we did for NIDOPS and for operations of the people. That's how we scale this. And then the final topic, unmanned traffic management and automated data service providers. First, we need a new acronym, ADS-B and ADS-P, just too close. That's minor. As proposed right now, the NPRM wants a complex system that could take years to implement. Keeping in mind that IBM and Parsons right now already have been leading the FAA's air traffic modernization effort with a target of 2028. This is after they've already worked on this for several years. So this means that we are less than confident that this proposal can actually happen in less than 5 to maybe even 10 years. What should we do instead? Well, first step, I think the FAA should show data that is proving why UTM must be mandatory in all of the airspace. Looking at international experience, we find that there is maybe a safer, more phased approach. For example, Transport Canada allows for low-risk BVLOS flights without having UTM while they're actually building the system. Well, it's still in development. This lets low-risk BVLOS operations move forward and UTM can mature in parallel. I think the US should follow something very similar. So there you have it. This is our position on fully autonomous BVLOS. We want to support where it improves safety and clarity and then fix what, adds a lot of burden without what we think is any benefits. Now, if you agree, you're going to have to tell the FAA in your own words. Your comment does matter, and I mean that, especially on these low-risk, non-BVLOS provisions that are going to shape how BVLOS scales into the real world. If you stay silent today, I mean this, we are stuck, you are stuck with the upcoming final ruling for the next decade, possibly. It's time to speak up now. You have about a month from the time this video is going to go live, about 3 weeks actually, and make sure that you are included in the future of BVLOS. Which takes me to the final portion of this video. How are you going to comment? Well, first you need to draft your comment, and there's a few key points here. First one, be polite, and I mean it, okay? Not being polite means your comment is going to get discarded. Not what you want. Agree when things are good. This is important because somebody else might say, I don't like this. But if you say, I like it, and 50 other people say, I like it, then they're going to keep it. But if only one person say, I don't like it, they might consider changing it. Also, disagree, but provide solutions. I want you to mention how this will affect you and your business, okay? And the last thing is do not copy-paste someone else's comment. It's only going to be counted as one. If anything, use somebody else's comment that you like, rework it so that it sounds like you. Now, we're going to provide you with a link to a downloadable document, which is going to include bullet points summarizing all the key points that we have in this video. Remove those that you don't agree with, add your own, tweak it, make it your own thing. And then actually, you know what I recommend that you do? Use your favorite AI software in order to formulate a nice response. Now, we're going to put a prompt that we're suggesting that you use, and with all the data, you put that in here and it should spit out a nice draft comment. This is a draft comment right now because make sure that you read it and that you agree with what you just wrote. And then what do you do next? Well, follow these steps. Step number 1, go to the Federal Register, federalregister.gov. Then you're going to search for the docket number. This is FAA-2025-1908. Okay? 1908 is when they started thinking about all of this. No, just kidding, it's not. You're going to verify that you're in the right place, and then you're going to click on public comments on the left-hand side. And then you're going to click on submit a comment. Now, this will take you to regulations.gov, where you're going to have to submit that comment. I know it's convoluted, but guess what? This is how it works. Last step, if your comment is too long, make sure you create a PDF out of it and then attach it to your comment. If it's short, just copy paste and put it in here. The deadline is October 6th of 2025. Now, I'm going to be serious for a second. We need as many voices as possible to make sure that the FAA understands that this pathway is critical for small businesses, farmers, cinematographers, recreational pilots, and everybody else who wants to fly beyond visual line of sight. Now, there should be 100,000 comments in here. We did 50,000 comments to Remote ID. There's no reason why we can't double that for this submission. Now, I'm passing the baton on to you. It's your turn now.